Hi, everybody. Good to see so many of you here, all wanting to find out a little bit more about crowdfunding. Well, crowdfunding has grown dramatically over the years. I've been involved in crowdfunding for 8 years now. I think I did my first crowdfunding talk down in Cornwall 8 years ago at the Tregenna Castle Hotel overlooking St. Ives, and I've had a daily diet of crowdfunding ever since. And it really has taken off over the years. Now, crowdfunding is not a new idea at all. It's an old concept. It's just moved online and has been given a new name, and is now called crowdfunding. And in the good old days, I remember when I ran the London Marathon, as we all do, as we tend to, when you get selected to go and run, you want to raise money for a particular charity or cause. And so I did, and I went around, got pledges beforehand. After the race, I went around and collected all the money. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. All you need to do is to email someone a link, and they click on the link, and up comes a page. And this page tells you everything that you need to know. And in this case, most pages have a crowdfunding video. They have a story under the video. They have a target amount. And if it's a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign, the rewards will be up there. So it's now all moved online. So with my background in digital marketing, I did a pivot to crowdfunding 8 years ago. And I would say about 80% of crowdfunding is largely digital marketing orientated. It's reaching out and connecting with people over the internet. So when it comes to crowdfunding, what I'm going to do is just to go through a series of slides here, and I'm going to go over 5 different types of crowdfunding. I'm sure we've all understand crowdfunding from your own experience, and from my point of view, that's probably you've engaged with crowdfunding in a particular way. And what I'm hoping to do today is to give you an overall perspective of crowdfunding so that you can go in and identify, firstly, what type of crowdfunding is best for you, and secondly, how you can probably go about thinking about using crowdfunding as a way to raise funding. Now, crowdfunding can benefit existing businesses, startups, and the non-profit social enterprise sector as well. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and can somebody, Andrea, can you see my screen?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay, full screen now? Good.
Perfect, yeah.
Right, so when it comes to crowdfunding, what is it? This is just a Wikipedia definition of crowdfunding. It's all about asking a crowd of people to donate or invest money for a specific cause. So in other words, it's a whole lot of small amounts that make up a large amount. It's like a collection plate that goes around the church. You're collecting lots of small amounts, and at the end of the collection, you've got a large amount. And to me, what excites me about crowdfunding, it's all about people investing money in people. They reckon crowdfunding is an excellent example of democratic finance, as it were. It allows a lot of people to participate in your project. So when it comes to crowdfunding, there are 5 different types of crowdfunding, and the first one is donation-based crowdfunding. This is where someone will donate some money and not expect anything in return. And the next type of crowdfunding is rewards-based crowdfunding, and this is where someone will invest with you, but they expect a product or service at the end of the day. They're prepared to wait X number of months for you to get your project off the ground so that they can actually benefit. The third type of crowdfunding is equity crowdfunding. And this is very much like a Dragon's Den scenario. So in other words, instead of going to the dragons and doing a pitch and 1 or 2 dragons investing, you're doing the same pitch, but you're getting hundreds of people who come in with small amounts to back you. And then there's debt-based crowdfunding. This is the largest sector, crowdfunding sector. It raises the most money, and this is where someone will go and borrow money from a crowdfunding website. So in many respects, it's very much like going to a bank. Instead of going to a bank for a loan, you go to a crowdfunding website for a loan, often referred to as peer-to-peer lending as well. And then the 5th type of crowdfunding is blockchain, raising funds on the blockchain using cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and the like. So let's.
Anthony, can I just
Yes.
ask? There's nobody waiting in the waiting room, is there currently?
I can't. No, I can't see anybody.
That's perfect. Okay.
Right. So when it comes to donation-based crowdfunding, there are thousands of crowdfunding websites out there all around the world, and these crowdfunding websites fall into one of these typically 5 different categories. So when it comes to donation-based crowdfunding, this Just Giving is a good example, particularly here in this country. They do operate out of other countries as well, and they do have a global reach, and they have helped raise billions for charity and the non-profit sector. And so in other words, in the past, you had to be a registered, or you had to have some sort of legal structure and be in the non-profit sector in order to benefit. And they would go along and collect gift aid. And today, what you can actually do on this website is also raise money for personal causes. So these crowdfunding websites may have started in a particular niche, but they grow and change and evolve over time as well. Now, some of you may have come across Stephen's story. He set up a page on Just Giving, and he was an 18-year-old who was unfortunately suffering from incurable cancer. But the one benefit that he had on his side was he had a great story. So he went out and he shared his story with people. He pointed them towards his page here. And you can see that he raised over 4.4 million there on his page. But with gift aid, it ended up being well over 5 million from 180,000 plus people. So all of that money that he raised by telling his story all went off to the Teenage Cancer Trust. So this is how Just Giving works. It allows organizations to allow their members to set up pages, and whatever money they raise then comes to them. The world's largest donation-based crowdfunding platform out there is GoFundMe. It's based out of New York, and they have helped raise billions for private causes. So in other words, here you can see George's family raised 8,000 for a new wheelchair to get him moving again. And so they operate also in the UK, and they have really helped people raise lots of money, billions and billions and billions. These are just some of their top fundraisers. You can see that there's one bottom left, £92,000, £72,000, £66,000. The reason I put this in is that typically this isn't the kind of money that is raised on this platform. It's normally closer to the £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 level. But one must realize that that the amount of money that you can raise is largely reliant on your crowd and their ability to give. So rewards-based crowdfunding, this is probably the most well-known type of crowdfunding out there. It gets the most press, and the most well-known website out there is Kickstarter. And you can see here that they have helped raise over 5 billion for businesses and projects and startups and what have you from and there have been 189,000 successfully funded projects as of yesterday. You can see there's been over 18 million backers who have backed these projects. 6 million of them are repeat backers. And there are anywhere up to about 5,000 projects that are live on these platforms on any one day. There was a drop during COVID, and that dropped down to about 3,000, but it's picking back up again. So this particular website helps people who are in the sort of creative sector. You can see up at the top there that you've got different categories like arts and comics and music and publishing and what have you. And if you're interested in using Kickstarter as a platform, the best way to actually do is to go to a category closest to where you fit in and actually see what's available. This is their top crowdfunding project that took place on Kickstarter a couple of years back. They raised 13 million for this coolest cooler, and from 62,000 backers. As an example of a crowdfunding campaign, it's a great example and a great video that you can actually go and watch. But you can see that in this case, what happened to the business after the crowdfunding campaign? Well, it didn't seem to go so well afterwards. But actually, as a crowdfunding example, there's a lot that you can learn from this particular campaign. Right, the next website out there that's a competitor, if you like, to Kickstarter is Indiegogo, and they are similar and have similar categories. However, they do have certain features that Kickstarter doesn't have. One of them is that they offer an all or nothing. They offer a flexible funding campaign, which means that if you don't reach your target, you still get whatever you raised. Whereas on Kickstarter, they offer an all or nothing target, which means that if you don't raise all your money, you don't get any of it. This is one of Indiegogo's most successful campaigns. You can see it's all about honey and bees. And this is a beehive where you insert a lever into the top of the beehive, you turn the lever and the honey just comes pouring out of the hive without disturbing the bees. And you can see that they raised over 12 million first time round, and then they went crowdfunding a second time and raised a similar amount. And this is an example of not only a very good crowdfunding campaign, but also what happened after the crowdfunding campaign. They've done extremely well. This country's largest rewards-based crowdfunding platform is Crowdfunder. It's based out in Newquay in Cornwall. They clearly nowhere near as big as these Indiegogo or Kickstarter. And however, they tend to work somewhat differently. I've just recently helped someone from Bristol on this platform. Not only did she reach her target, but she got match funding from NatWest as well. So in other words, there are opportunities on this particular website, which the other two don't offer, and that is match funding. And this match funding comes from businesses, county councils, and so on. So, and here you can see that they also, we're offering 100% free crowdfunding for anyone who needs to raise funds to start a business as a result the coronavirus crisis. So that is something that they're able to offer. And also, because of this match funding, it's up to you to go in and see whether you can benefit or qualify from any of these projects. Here you can see that they've got various categories as well: health and well-being, equality, environment and sustainability, and what have you. And you can see that these projects typically are live on these rewards-based platforms for about 30 days. And you can get an idea as to what's happening. To me, the best way to figure out rewards-based crowdfunding is actually to go into the section or the category that's closest to what you're doing and actually go and see what's happening there and actually go and back some crowdfunding campaigns yourself so that you can experience the whole crowdfunding process from an investor's perspective. You need to understand their journey as well as working out yours. Right, so when it comes to equity crowdfunding has really taken off in the UK. The UK are world leaders when it comes to equity crowdfunding. And the most well-known equity crowdfunding platform out there is Crowdcube. They started life in the Innovation Centre in Exeter and have grown quite dramatically over the years since they've been around. You can see that you can see on the bottom left, invested in pitches. This is a I couldn't find their latest figures yesterday when I was looking around, but I imagine that the amount that they have raised is not 689 million, it's closer to $1 billion now. They have over 750,000 people who are registered on the platform who are interested in backing crowdfunding campaigns. So that's a potential source of people who might back your project if you use one of these platforms. And successful raises 883. I'm sure that it's closer to 1 million, closer to 1,000 businesses that have benefited from about $1 billion that's been raised. This is just an example of a company in Swindon, a recycling technologies company. They went crowdfunding twice on this platform. You can see on this particular raise, they raised 3.6 million from 1,472 investors. They initially only wanted 1.2 million, but they eventually increased their equity to move it up to 3.6 million. And the thing about crowdfunding on these platforms is that once you've had a successful raise, there's nothing stopping you going back at some point in the future and doing another raise. This is just an example of a bank, Monzo. They raised 20 million on this particular platform from 36,000 people in 2 days, 2 hours and 45 minutes. So these raises can be quite quick if people like your idea, or it goes over 35, 40 days, depending on whatever period of time that you've agreed to. These are just, they've got quite a number of case studies on their website. So if you want to go and look at any of them, please do. The one in there in the middle, Sugru, some of you may have come across this moldable glue. A great product that's available in the hardware stores and elsewhere. Jane, I can't pronounce her surname, she's Irish, I've actually met her, but she went crowdfunding several times on this particular platform to help her business get going. Now, the next equity crowdfunding platform there is Cedars. They're based out of London, and they operate in a similar manner to Crowdcube. Their model was somewhat different in the beginning. In other words, on Crowdcube, if you raised on Crowdcube and you had, say, 1,000 investors, well, you had to manage those 1,000 investors, whereas on Cedars, they had a nominee shareholder structure, which meant that they handled your shareholders on your behalf. Clearly, it cost a bit more, but that was one of the big differences between the two platforms. Having said that, last week in the news, it looks like Cedars and Crowdcube are going to merge into one big platform in the months ahead. It depends on whether they'll be given permission to do that. But these are the two most well-known platforms, Crowdcube and Cedars. And this is a project that I got off their, this is their, how can I put it, homepage that I took a screenshot of yesterday. And you can see that they have raised their 976 million, close on $1 billion for businesses. Also, the number of deals is just over 1,000 and so on. What they do have is something called a secondary market. The interesting thing here is that the investors, if they're going to invest in any of these projects on Cedars, is that their money is literally tied up or locked up for between 5 and 7 years before they can get some sort of return, or the company goes for some sort of exit. But here what they're doing is they're testing out a secondary market, which means that there's a possibility, just a possibility, that if you have bought shares in a company via Cedars, that you can sell those shares to other people if there are any interested takers. But these are only, the secondary market only operates between people who are registered on the platform and is not open to the general public yet. A few weeks ago, I invested in this company, Nude. It's an app which helps aspiring homeowners to buy their first home. And so once again, if you're interested in going equity crowdfunding, I suggest that you go in and invest in a couple of these projects, because it'll give you a good idea as to what their video looks like, or the standard of video, their business proposal, their financials, etc., and so on. This was from this is their pitch. Part of the information is available on the public side of the website. The rest is in the back office, as it were. So you've got to sign up and get certified before you can actually participate. These are just some of the businesses that have gone crowdfunding on equity platforms. Perkbox, there you can see they raised 4.3 million and gave away just under 2% equity. Here's another one here, Chapel Down, which is a wine estate that wanted to set up a brewery. They raised just under 4 million as well. And this is their Cedars secondary market. Right, and I just took a screenshot of some of the shares that are available there. Right, so when it comes to debt-based crowdfunding, it's all about people lending money to people. And I don't know if any of you have ever come across Zopa, but Zopa is a website for personal loans, not for business loans, but for personal loans. And they've done so well over the years. They have helped lend out over 5 billion. That I think I read somewhere recently that they've applied for a banking license. So it's possible that Zopa could turn into a bank at some point in the future. They're based out of London, and they have lent out lots and lots of money. Funding Circle is for businesses. You've probably heard about Funding Circle. They advertise quite extensively, and they offer unsecured loans of between 10K and 500K, $500,000. And you know, you've got to be one big criteria for funding circle is that you've got to be in business for 2 years. In other words, you've got to be able to demonstrate 2 years worth of financials before you can raise money on this particular platform. Up there in the top right hand corner, you can see that this platform has lent out over 10 billion to businesses. And yeah, so then you get the fifth type of crowdfunding. It's started off in the blockchain world called the initial coin offering. It's now called, most people who now go crowdfunding on the blockchain go and do it on an exchange. So it's now called an initial exchange offering. And basically, the big issue here is that countries don't really know how to regulate cryptocurrencies, including the UK. However, there are 2 countries in Europe that have enshrined in law support for cryptocurrency crowdfunding, and that is Gibraltar and Malta. So those would be 2 countries that you might want to consider raising money via cryptocurrencies. It's very expensive to do that. You've got to have at least to invest about £50,000 before you can get going, but you can raise incredible amounts of money on the blockchain itself. So you don't necessarily have to understand what the blockchain is. It's just a technology that helps prevent fraud and various other things. But on top of the blockchain, you have certain you have cryptocurrencies, tokens, smart contracts, and these features are then used to actually run and manage an initial coin offering. So just to give an example of a bobsleigh, I mean, I don't know whether you knew Jamaica had a bobsleigh federation. Some of you may have seen the film Cool Runnings, but they needed money to go to the Sochi Olympics. And basically, there is a community out there called the Dogecoin community, and they clubbed together and they raised $30,000 and converted it from Dogecoin into fiat currency, into dollars, and for their community, for this team. Then they did a traditional crowdfunding campaign after that on another platform and raised another 80,000. So when it closed on the 22nd of January 2014, the campaign had raised 129,000. So that was the money. It was a combination in this case between cryptocurrency crowdfunding and traditional crowdfunding that got them to the Olympics. Some of you may have heard of Telegram. Telegram is an app. They went and raised money via an ICO, an initial coin offering. This is on the other extreme of the blockchain crowdfunding, and they raised 1.7 billion, which is ridiculous in my mind. But anyway, they did. But typically, that's at the other end of the extreme. But if you're interested, it's good to go and see what's available and become familiar with how that all works. Right. So when it comes to crowdfunding, there are a whole lot of niche crowdfunding platforms out there, and in other words, focused in on a particular sector. In this case, Unbound is focused on authors. So in other words, if you're an author and you want to write a book, you can put a few chapters on this particular website, and they will not only help you raise money for it, but they'll actually get the book printed at the end of the day as well. So here's an example of a book that someone is busy writing, and lots of other books on this particular website. So if you're an author and you want to go crowdfunding for your book, you may want to consider that. The house crowd, when it comes to crowdfunding and real estate and or property, is a very good match. There's been a tremendous amount of money raised for property using crowdfunding, and this company, House Crowd, up in the Midlands, have raised over 100 million for initially residential properties, later for commercial properties, and so on. So that is a good company to go and follow, and if you're interested in property crowdfunding, to go and invest in. Crowd Justice is another website. In other words, if you want to take legal action, you can go and put your project up on here and raise money for it. These are just some examples of some of those things. Some of the projects here: Help Us Stop BBC Bias. Someone has already raised 21,000 of 30,000 that they needed to do whatever they wanted to go and do. Right, so another website here, BitGive. This is a foundation, a nonprofit foundation based in California in the United States, and they set up a blockchain website. Yeah, first Bitcoin and blockchain nonprofit charity. One of the things I like about this is that they, what you can do is you can build in various milestones onto the blockchain. So money only gets released once the project has reached various milestones. So I think that there's going to be more and more charities that are going to be using websites like this to raise money using cryptocurrencies. Some of you may have come across BrewDog. BrewDog is an example of a company that has gone crowdfunding, but they have gone equity crowdfunding, but they raised the money on their own website. So in other words, they didn't go to Crowdcube or Seeders or one of these other websites, except once. I know that BrewDog went crowdfunding on Crowdcube once, and I think that they've now started a second round recently, which might be live soon, or I can't remember, but anyway, basically they call their equity program Equity for Punks, and you can see right down at the bottom in the middle that they have raised in the region of 72 million so far using the blockchain. Hubbub is a company that provide the software, and they've helped universities set up their own crowdfunding campaign websites for universities around the country. So they help with what is referred to as white label software, and they've also got their own website where they help students raise money for their university studies. So in this case, you can see Emily Rose Squirlesk raised $26,000 for her master's degree at Oxford. Right, Pledge Music. This was a huge website, a very long-standing, well-recognized website for musicians out there who would raise money for their albums and for their tours and what have you. Unfortunately, it went bankrupt last year. So my advice to you is that if you're going to consider one of these niche crowdfunding platforms, make sure that things are okay, that they're stable. But they ran into problems. This website no longer exists. I just happened to put it up there for you to be aware that these niche crowdfunding platforms, you need to be 100% happy that they're not going to walk away with your money at the end of the day. Seed and Spark is for those people who want to do films. So film projects, crowdfunding documentaries, things like that. Unfortunately, there isn't a UK equivalent. They're based in the States, but they've got some incredible resources for people if they want to go and raise money for films. Fig is a website for gamers. And so in other words, you can take an equity stake in a company that is busy developing games. This is a huge area, and lots of money is raised on that platform and on others. Dig Ventures, here's an archaeological website. You can raise money for digs. I've met someone who's raised money for archaeological digs on this website. Kiva is a crowdfunding website, but it's got a slightly different mission. You lend money to small businesses all around the world through third-party agencies. And typically they're raising between, say, $1,000 and $2,000 to get a small business off the ground. You don't get anything back other than the benefit of knowing that you've helped someone. So they borrow money from you and they eventually pay it back, and then you can lend it out again or withdraw it. BritBots is a website here in the States. It funds and supports UK-based robotics and artificial intelligence. If you're into that, you might consider that. Now, I'm coming back to Kickstarter now. They have a little program called Quickstarter. They say it's okay to think small. Now, for me, what's important when it comes to crowdfunding, you don't have to go for a big crowdfunding campaign. You might want to start with a little crowdfunding campaign. In other words, get a small campaign or a small success under your belt. And they've got this little project here. They're saying that you must plan your project in 3 months or less. The second rule is keep the campaign under 20 days. The third is the funding goal should be under $1,000. Rule 4, offer rewards under 50. Rule 5, shoot the video in 1 day. Rule 6, no PR or media outreach unless contacted. And no paid ads on social media. So you will be amazed at what you can learn by just running a small campaign before you go for the big one. Right, and this is another type of crowdfunding. I suppose it could be considered the sixth type of crowdfunding, but it is a separate category on its own. In other words, it's subscription crowdfunding. So in other words, someone is paying you a monthly amount on a regular basis. And the most well-known website out there is Patreon. I'm sure some of you have come across it. It's largely for creatives. It's basically almost like a membership website where people pay a monthly fee, and particularly useful for podcasters, video creators, etc. A lot of YouTube channels, for example, rely on support from the people who consume their content, and a lot of them have actually got accounts on Patreon. This is just someone that I happen to follow. You can see that he has 650 patrons on his page on Patreon, and he generates a regular monthly income of just under $5,000 every single month. There are other websites that offer a similar model. There's Steady. It's based in Germany, for example. And this is a client that I helped, and you can see that he's got 222 members, and he has a regular income of around $2,000, 2,000 euros every month. So that's subscription crowdfunding. You must remember that all of these crowdfunding websites that we've looked at, they all charge fees. And you can see here that Indiegogo, for example, charge a 5% platform fee. And then there's an additional transaction fee. So in other words, typically it's 5% for Indiegogo if you're going to put your project there. And for the payment processor, the company that manages your credit card and what have you, they're the ones that charge an extra 3%. When it comes to GoFundMe and all the other crowdfunding platforms, just check out what their rates are. They tend to change from time to time, especially during COVID. Things have changed as well. And yeah, so right, when it comes to some case studies, this is some of you might have come across this. This is a Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. These two, Elena and Francesca, put one crowdfunding campaign together, and you can see that they got 13,000 backers who raised $675,000. They then went on to In Demand, where they raised some more, and then they brought out book number 2, and then they raised from a further 15,000 people another 866,000. So in other words, they raised well over 2 million for their book. Here's my niece. I bought her these books, and she sent me a picture saying, "Hi, thank you very much. I'm enjoying it. I'm already on page 44. Here are some students that I helped at Loughborough University. I've been up there 5 times helping students launch their businesses. And here is Susie and Sophie. They started a company, Snowwear for Women, and they went crowdfunding. You can see they raised 21,000. Stephen Conway came to me. He had a vegan chocolate business in Salisbury, and he wanted to bring out a new range of chocolate. And I obviously backed him because I got this in the post, and lovely, lovely chocolate. And then because he was successful with his crowdfunding campaign, in other words, he reached his target on day 1, he then went on to Dragon's Den, and he raised a further 75,000 from one of the dragons there. And this is just showing you how he went over his goal within 24 hours of launching his project. This is Sugru, a very good example of an equity crowdfunding campaign. I've got videos of all of these examples here that you can gain access to. You can see that they raised a lot of money, but their video is a very good example of a crowdfunding video. You can see they went raising money on 2 separate occasions. Rachel Shenton, some of you might have heard, she put together a 20-minute documentary called The Silent Child, based in Swindon, and Macy was the star of the actual 20-minute documentary, and they raised 12,000 on Indiegogo, and they went on to win an Oscar for this particular 20-minute video. The Bicycle Academy down in Frome in Somerset, they offered frame building courses. Andrew there didn't have any equipment inside his workshop, so he wanted to raise money for that, and he was oversubscribed. A very good example of a very good crowdfunding campaign. It took place some time ago, but it's still worth going back and seeing what he did. Right, these are videos that I have. You can sign up for free and have a look at a whole lot of videos that I put together covering the various different types of crowdfunding. Videos are a very important part of your crowdfunding campaign, and I suggest that you go and watch the videos that other people have put together. This is a lunchbox reimagined. They raised over $1 million. They're based here in London from 12,000 people. They had a very good video as well. Sugru's video was very good. And this is an example. Bramley Engaged, they raised, they borrowed money from Funding Circle to turn their fruit farm into producing gin. Right, so when people come to me, they always ask me questions about crowdfunding. These are the kind of questions that I get all the time. How much money can I raise through crowdfunding? What targets should I set? How long should my crowdfunding campaign last for? What is all or nothing versus flexible crowdfunding? How much time do I need to run a crowdfunding campaign? What rewards and pledges should I choose for my supporters? Who will give money to my campaign? You know, how do I protect my idea or intellectual property? You know, when it comes to running a crowdfunding campaign, there are a whole lot of success factors that you need to have in place. You don't need to have them all in place, but you need to have enough of them in place. And you need to know what they are before you go crowdfunding. And I can honestly say at this particular point that the secret to crowdfunding is in the name. So in other words, if you don't have a crowd, you can't go crowdfunding. Right, when it comes to stats, Kickstarter are the most open when it comes to statistics. You can go onto their website and find which categories do better than other categories. Crowdfunding is regulated, some of it at any rate. You can see that donation and rewards-based crowdfunding is not regulated in this country, but equity and debt is, which means that you've got to adhere to certain rules and regulations. And no one really knows what's going on with the ICOs in the UK yet, so I wouldn't do that here. Right, to finish off, the benefits of crowdfunding. Why would you want to go crowdfunding? Well, crowdfunding, to me, the biggest takeaway to crowdfunding is not the money. Crowdfunding gives you the opportunity to test your idea on the crowd to see whether they like it or not. And it's a very low risk, cheap way of doing it. It's also a wonderful way to go market your concept or idea. It doesn't matter whether your campaign succeeds or fails. By virtue of the fact that you've gone crowdfunding, has allowed you it gives you an opportunity to spread the word. Also, there's a fashion company out there that goes crowdfunding every month. So in other words, they're growing their customer base every single month by going crowdfunding on a regular basis. You also get a lot of customer data. You obviously get money when you go crowdfunding. But to me, what I have seen is once you are successful with your crowdfunding campaign, and the majority of crowdfunding campaigns fail, over 70% of crowdfunding campaigns fail, and you don't want to be part of that 70%. But once you have that successful campaign, that often unlocks additional funding from all sorts of other sources afterwards. Right, what are the downsides to crowdfunding? Well, it does take time to put a crowdfunding campaign together. Some people are worried about the intellectual property. Some people find that the fees may be too expensive. Regulation changes from time to time. You've got to be on top of that. You've got to make sure that you choose the right website because that can make or break your campaign. And what I have noticed over the last 80 years is that crowdfunding has become more diverse and complex. There's more, crowdfunding this year was supposed to be a $100 billion industry. So in other words, crowdfunding is here to stay, and it is now bigger than venture capital, for example. So it's not going anywhere. So the last slide here, where is crowdfunding going from here? Studies at various universities have shown that women are more successful than men at crowdfunding. As I've said, it's now a $100 billion industry. When it comes to charities and social enterprises, I find that they haven't really adopted crowdfunding as a way forward. So I think that they're missing out on a trick there. We'll see in the future more cryptocurrency in crowdfunding. And the one thing about crowdfunding is, it's all about when you go crowdfunding, you build up the know, like, and trust factor, which for me is a fantastic thing for anybody. And so when it comes to crowdfunding resources, I have a website with some resources that you may be interested in. It's called the crowdfundingplaybook.com. And I've got a whole lot of free resources on there. So on the top left, you can join the crowdfunding community. In the middle, there's a 31-page PDF detailing 46 essential tools for crowdfunding. Then on the top right, you've got crowdfunding videos. And then I've got PDFs there at the bottom, how to create a great video, how to tell your story, you know, what crowdfunding fulfillment is all about. And I've got more besides that. So if you join the community, I'm launching the community tomorrow for the very first time. If you're interested to being part of a Facebook-like community, you can gain access to that from the Crowdfunding Playbook website. So to finish off, and I'm ready to answer questions now, crowdfunding is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So it's not a quick fix, in other words. So in order to go crowdfunding, you need a crowd. You need time to run a crowdfunding campaign. I often tend to refer to crowdfunding as a crash course in launching a business online, because the same things that you need to do to launch it and run and manage a crowdfunding campaign are the same things that you need to have in place to run a business on an ongoing basis anyway. Also, it helps you raise some money, and your idea must be crowdfundable. Okay, so thank you, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have.
That's great, Anthony. Thanks so much. Can you flip the host back to me, please? And I'll
do
just.
that.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got one question in already. So this is from Michael. I'm keen to learn about companies that help you manage a campaign, such as LaunchBoom.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Michael. There you go. You can speak for yourself.
I won't add much to that, but so yeah, I'm seriously considering the crowdfunding option. I've got a very early new brand, furniture brand called Peg Furniture. It's aimed at primarily people who move home a lot, or the new home office market. All the furniture comes apart really easily. So this is the stool top, and the legs fit in.
Great.
And everything goes together with little wooden pegs. So I've had a lot of good early feedback, but I'd like to launch the Peg desk aimed at the work for home market. And I joined in with a free online conference called the Crowdfunding Summit, which was run by a company called LaunchBoom.
It's interesting. I attended that one myself as well.
Yeah. It was my annual shot in the arm of Californian optimism and can-do attitude. Everyone was awesome. Everyone was, you know, the best person ever. So, but yeah, just to shut up, I've got to the second stage now where I've had the first half an hour call with them, because you can apply. I think you can just pay them to help you run your campaign, but they will pick a select number of projects. If they like you and they think that you've got a good chance, and they are B2C physical products, which suits me, then they'll take a percentage stake of the money raised, which seems attractive to someone with only £3,000 or £4,000 left in the business bank account. But I just wondered if you had wisdom, as I'm sure you do, on this new industry of organizations that will promise to sort of help you, and they have the templates, they have the data of what's worked in the past, etc.
Well, there are many companies out there that'll help you run a crowdfunding campaign. For example, I get a lot of requests myself, and I don't run crowdfunding campaigns. So in other words, the reason I don't is because there are too many moving parts in a crowdfunding campaign, and I can't guarantee an outcome. But that's my point of view. Okay, so I help with strategy. However, in your case, with this particular company, they're probably the leading company in the United States when it comes to with a recognized track record, and with a whole lot of people on board who understand what they need to do in terms of all the various moving parts. So they'll not only help you set things up, about 80% of the work is all the setup, but they'll also help you during the campaign, particularly with paid advertising. So, but they do charge a lot of money, an incredible amount of money to get going. So if you're looking for someone to actually not only help you set up, but actually, you see, when it comes to crowdfunding, the secret, as I said, to crowdfunding is in the name. So you need a crowd. So I don't know what your crowd looks like, but there are three types of crowds, if you like. So in other words, the first but fundamentally, strangers do not back crowdfunding campaigns. So how does crowdfunding work? So the first third of your funding, and I'm overgeneralizing now, but I need to put it into some sort of context. The first third of your funding comes from your own network and needs to come in within the first 48 hours of within the first 24 hours of launching. So in other words, you need to adjust your target or grow your crowd so that you feel comfortable that you can raise a third of your funding within the first 24 hours of launching. And that comes from your own network. It doesn't matter whether it's rewards-based crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding, that needs to happen. So, so once you have reached your third, that is psychologically so important for the other crowds that I'm going to describe in a moment. So in other words, people have got to see momentum before they come in to your campaign. So where does the second crowd, the second amount of money comes from? So if the first 33% comes from your crowd, the second 33% of your funding comes from the network of the first crowd. So in other words, you go back to your first crowd and you say to your first crowd, thank you very much for supporting me. Can you please reach, since you like what I'm doing, can you please promote me to your network? And that's typically where the next 33% of your funding comes from. And then, right, where does the last, so those people don't know you, but they know the person, the people who backed you initially. So they're not strangers. They're strangers to you, but they're not strangers to your network. Then where the last 33%, well, where does that come from? That typically comes from third-party validation, if you like. So it comes from, you know, have you developed a relationship with any journalists, any bloggers? Because these people, or influencers, these people have already built up crowds. And so you've got to find these influencers who have crowds which are aligned with what you are hoping to achieve. So if you develop a relationship with the people who head up these crowds, once you reach 66% of your funding, you can then ask them to put your message or your story in front of their crowd. And that is typically, they are promoting you, and which means that when they click on the link, they come to your campaign and they already see that you're 66% funded. And so they see momentum. People like to associate with success. So there's a higher chance that they'll actually get out their debit or credit card and back you on your campaign. So, so when it comes to the company launch boom, there are probably very few companies out there that I would recommend, but they would be at the top end of my recommendation list if I had to recommend a company. And one of the personalities there, Mark Picota, has actually written a book, which he's just recently released on Amazon, all about crowdfunding. You may want to buy his book just to go through it. But he's one of the personalities in Launch Boom. So yeah, you've got to decide. Another study has shown that teams raise more money than single individuals. So if teams raise more money, don't present yourself as a single individual on your crowdfunding campaign. Get a group of people around you. And also because there's work involved in running a crowdfunding campaign, it gives you an opportunity to divide the work up amongst other people as well. And so these are just some of the factors that you need to take into account. Does that answer some of what you were wanting to know?
I think so. That's it. So it sounds like you're on to a starter there then, Michael.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah.
Super. I know there's probably a few of you have questions as well. Does anybody else want to unmute themselves and ask anything?
I've got a question.
Hi, Spencer.
Hi. So this kind of builds on the last answer, which was a good kind of starter, I think. I've talked to a couple people who have done crowdfunding in the past, and they have all said, you know, that they felt certainly in agreement that you needed to start with a certain amount of funding, more or less guaranteed, from, you know, family, friends, or whoever it is. I'm wondering, you know, should we look at crowdfunding more as a kind of an additional kind of top-up investment source rather than a primary investment source? And the reason I say that is because I think most of the guys I've talked to who have done crowdfunding have usually started with, say, 70% of the amount that they're trying to raise.
Spencer, what kind of crowdfunding are you thinking of doing?
This is all in the technology sector where, you know, they're looking at raising, myself included, a couple £100,000.
Is this rewards-based crowdfunding?
No, it would be probably equity-based.
Equity-based. Well, with all of these, it doesn't matter whether it's rewards or equity, the further you are down the road in terms of having developed the idea, the better. Because, for example, Kickstarter, if you're going to launch anything on Kickstarter, particularly a product, and most Kickstarter projects are product-based, B2C, you will find that I'm just trying to remember the point I was going to make. Sorry, it just went out of my head. The products, yes. So if you could just rephrase your question again, Spencer.
Sure. My question is essentially, do you think we should be, for example, for myself, for others who are looking to raise a substantial amount of money, a couple £100,000, in this case, in a technology space, should we look at Kickstarter or any crowdfunding campaign really as more of a additional source or a main source of funding?
Now you can start off straight away. I remember the point that I was going to make. When it comes to Kickstarter, they insist that you have a working prototype. So in other words, as long as you've got a working prototype, in other words, it's not just a photographic rendition of a model or whatever the case might be. As long as you have something that you can go straight away into mass production, and basically what you're looking for is enough money to tool up and or get the first batch of items to a point where you can deliver it to the front door of the investor. That is probably the critical point. So in other words, you've got to invest enough money to get you to the point where you have a working prototype, and that is a good place to go crowdfunding. So in other words, you may want 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000, but if you can go for a small target and overshoot your target, shoot past your target, in other words, go for a stretch target, as we call it, that would be better than saying, I want 100. In other words, go for the minimum amount that you can possibly go for in order to make the numbers work, in order to get your first batch of product out the door. And then base that on the making sure that you can raise a third of that target. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Actually, Anthony, sticking with technology, so what's the best platform for B2B tech solutions?
I would say Indiegogo and Kickstarter. So in other words, you decide. Kickstarter insists on an all or nothing target, whereas so does Indiegogo also offer that, but they also offer a flexible target. So I would go for an all or nothing on both platforms. And the reason is that people are more motivated to back an all or nothing project than a flexible target, because if you need X amount of money in order to do something, then that's what you need. And if you only raise half of that on a flexible target, well, then the backer will say to them, well, I'm a bit worried now. Where are you going to get the other half? And am I going to get my reward at the end of the day? So these are the considerations. But I know that Indiegogo have had tremendous success with tech projects.
Perfect. That's
it's not to say that it doesn't work on Kickstarter.
Okay. Somebody's saying here that Funding Circle requires 2 years trading. Is there an alternative that will allow for startups?
There are quite a number of alternatives out there, but they require some sort of collateral. So if you've got that, then there are other websites that you can consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions, anyone? Anybody who's seriously considering crowdfunding imminently? Do you have any questions that maybe Anthony hasn't covered off already? Although it's been quite comprehensive, I have to say.
Right, B2B, food and beverages. I've just seen Adrian come in there with a question.
Yes, well spotted.
Right, now I did actually have a an example of a food and beverage crowdfunding platform, but unfortunately they didn't make it. And I haven't come across another one that's specifically focused in on that particular sector. So I suggest one of the more generic websites, Kickstarter, Indiegogo for a food and beverage project if it's rewards, and Crowdcube or equity if Crowdcube and Seeders for equity. So there isn't an outstanding food and beverage crowdfunding platform that I'm aware of.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Oh, best for theatre. We're a charity touring. Right. Now, if you go onto Kickstarter, you'll see, believe it or not, that the two categories that have the highest success on Kickstarter is dance and theatre. I think it's around 60% of projects that launch on Kickstarter in both those categories get to reach their target. So I would seriously look at Kickstarter as a platform to use for touring. You know, if you're pre-selling tickets or whatever the case might be, go and check out what's happening in that sector for other, you know, since Kickstarter has been able to provide such a high level of success for those two categories. I suggest you go and check out what's going on there and go and back a few yourself.
Perfect. Raoul, you have a question.
Oh, hi. First of all, thank you very much. It was such a nice session, actually. So I've been an entrepreneur and we are mainly into AI. We are into the domain from past 4 years. Our products are already there in the hospitals. We are into the medical imaging domain where our software reads the X-rays and mammograms and it detects the abnormalities like tuberculosis, COVID-19, nodules, fibrosis, pneumonia, and breast cancer is the latest addition. And all these, what I mentioned, our accuracy is more than 0.8. And the usual human accuracy is 0.7. So all these detections happen more or less or more than human accuracy. These solutions are already being on trial and being used by hospitals in Vietnam and India. So I was thinking about using the crowdfunding from a long time, because if you want to go fast, a lot of regulatory approvals are needed, a lot of money is needed. FDA approval takes around $500,000. And obviously we have already applied for CE marking, which is already funded. So at the moment we are funding our company. It's all self-funded. It's money comes from our services arm. Now I want to go ahead for the crowdfunding. You have already answered that probably Ibibo is the right platform for that. But at the same time, I want to do it in a very structured way. I want to hire some consultant because we have no idea. I mean, this is whatever I heard from you today is all I know, because I was so busy developing the product and never got into. I spoke to a few VCs, but they were asking for more, and we thought we'll keep on doing the self-funding. So can you suggest me, if we want to go with a consultant, basically hand-holding for the crowdfunding, which site to go? Is the video right? Is the content right? Are you doing the approaching? So can you be the one? If so, how it works, something like that. And also I have one more question. Do you think my idea is eligible, first of all, or for crowdfunding at all?
Well, I don't know, Anthony, I don't know whether that's something you might want to pick up with Raoul separately to this. So would that be a better conversation?
Very much so. Very much so. Yes, well, I'm happy to spend some time separately with you going over.
Yeah, Raoul, can I make an introduction to Anthony via email for you, and you can pick up with him directly on that?
Yes, that'll be good. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm just conscious of time. We've got a couple more questions. Paul is asking, what is the best for crowdfunding for equity? Now, Paul joined a little bit late, so I think you covered this off, Anthony, but what was the best for equity funding?
Well, the two in this country, is Crowdcube and Seeders.
That's right.
And there is another one. The world's largest equity platform is actually based. This is something, Raoul, that you can look at as well, because they do fund a lot of medical projects, and that is ourcrowd.com, and they're based out of Jerusalem in Israel, and they have offices all around the world. But they take on huge medical projects, but other businesses as well. But that's the world's largest equity platform. But in terms of this country, if you want to raise money in this country under the laws of this country, then Seeders and Equity are the Seeders and Crowdcube are the two that I recommend.
That's perfect. And Victoria, you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself? And hi.
I just wanted to ask what your thoughts were on, you know, how you're saying 70% of projects don't usually get funded. How damaging do you think it is for reputation for not getting funded?
Not necessarily a problem. It depends on how you manage it, you know. Your reputation is obviously important. If you didn't reach your target, I showed you those two, Sophie and that British snowwear for women. Well, both of them came on my crowdfunding, my one-day crowdfunding workshop. They both went off and did a campaign. They asked for 30,000 and they only raised 20. So the first time round they failed. They relaunched 6 weeks later and they reduced their target from 30,000 down to 20,000, and then they raised 21,000. So in other words, they were able to go back to their existing crowd who supported them first time round and said, right, we feel that we can still do the project with a low target. The problem is with Kickstarter is once that you set a target, you can't bring it down, you can't change it. To me, it depends on how you manage that process. So if you didn't make it, what did you do? Did you update them? Did you email them? Did you tell them what your thoughts were around the matter? Did you say that you were possibly going to do it again in the future, that you'd still like to have them on board? It's a case of managing your reputation. The damage normally comes that once you've raised the money, that the person doesn't get the product at the end of the day, or whatever it is that you promised them. That's normally where the reputational damage comes from.
Brilliant.
Not from a failed campaign. I wouldn't worry about a failed campaign.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you, Anthony. Any more questions, anyone? Just checking the chat. No, nothing. Okay, Anthony, thank you so very much. Obviously, I'll circulate your details, and Anthony's very kindly to offer to speak to any of you after this. So if there are any specific questions relating to your circumstances and you want to check with him, then please do so. Anthony, that's been fantastic. I've learned a lot.
Oh, great.
So that's brilliant. Thanks ever so much, everyone.